The phone buzzed at 2:47 a.m., and I knew my marriage was over. Not because Lena was calling, hell, she was supposed to be sipping champagne in some Parisian cafe with her college girlfriends, celebrating her last hurrah before 40. No, it was because the phone buzzing wasn't hers. It was the backup iPhone she thought she'd hidden in our bedroom drawer, underneath her collection of expensive lingerie I'd never seen her wear. For me, anyway. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. My name's Gabe Franklin, and I'm a 41-year-old construction foreman who apparently married a woman with more secrets than a CIA operative. I'd been lying in our king-sized bed, the one we'd picked out together at that overpriced furniture store in Portland, staring at the ceiling and wondering why my wife of 12 years needed a girls' trip to Europe that cost more than my truck. The buzzing wouldn't stop. 3 short bursts, pause, 3 more. Someone really wanted to reach her. I'm not proud of what I did next, but I'm not ashamed either. When you've been married long enough, you develop a sixth sense about these things. The late-night work calls, the new gym membership she never used, the way she'd started doing her laundry separately, claiming I didn't understand delicates. I opened the drawer. The phone screen lit up with notifications. 17 missed messages from Victor A. The preview text made my blood run cold. Baby, can't wait to see you at the lake house tomorrow. Wear that red thing I bought you. My hands were shaking as I scrolled through the message history. 3 months of conversations. Photos I won't describe but will never forget. Plans for romantic getaways that coincidentally lined up with her work conferences. And the kicker, detailed discussions about how they were going to handle the Gabe situation, once they decided to make things official. Apparently, I was a situation that needed handling. I set the phone back in the drawer, closed it softly, and walked to the kitchen. Our kitchen, with the granite countertops Lena had insisted we needed, the stainless steel appliances that cost more than some people's cars, and the breakfast nook where we used to drink coffee together on Sunday mornings. I made myself a cup of coffee at 3 in the morning and started planning. See, here's what cheaters never understand about the people they betray. We're not stupid. We notice things. We remember details. And some of us, the ones who've spent 20 years managing construction crews and dealing with contractors who think they can screw you over, we know how to be patient. Lena thought she was married to a simple blue-collar guy who wouldn't figure out her sophisticated little affair. She was half right about the blue-collar part. I spent the rest of that night going through everything. Her laptop password was our anniversary date, which felt like a particularly cruel irony. Her credit card statements, which showed charges at restaurants I'd never been to and hotels in towns she'd never mentioned visiting. Her email, where she'd been coordinating with her friend Britt about alibis and cover stories. By sunrise, I had a complete picture of my wife's double life. And I had a plan. The funny thing about construction work is that it teaches you to think systematically. You don't just tear down a building. You study its structure, identify the load-bearing elements, and remove them in the right order. Otherwise, the whole thing comes crashing down on your head. I was about to apply those same principles to my marriage. Lena came home 3 days early, which should have been my first clue that something had gone wrong in paradise. I was in the garage, pretending to organize my tools while actually installing a small digital recorder in her car. Nothing illegal, just something to help me understand her schedule better. "Gabe, I'm home." Her voice had that artificial brightness she used when she was nervous about something. I walked into the house to find her struggling with 2 large suitcases. For a woman who'd supposedly spent 10 days backpacking through Europe with girlfriends, she sure had a lot of luggage. "Hey, babe." I kissed her cheek, noting the expensive perfume I'd never smelled before. "How was Paris? You didn't call much." "Oh, you know how it is with international phones. So expensive." She was avoiding eye contact, which was classic Lena when she was lying. "I brought you something, though." She handed me a small bag containing a keychain with the Eiffel Tower on it. The kind of generic tourist crap you can buy at any airport gift shop. I turned it over and saw the small sticker on the bottom, Made in China. Thanks, honey, this is great. I kept my voice neutral. How was Britt and Jessica? You guys have fun? Oh yeah, we had a blast. You know how we get when we're all together. She was pulling clothes out of her suitcase rapidly, not looking at me. I'm exhausted, though. That flight was brutal. I watched her unpack, noting the men's dress shirt she quickly shoved to the bottom of the laundry basket. Size large. I wear medium, and besides, I don't own any shirts that nice. I'm going to grab a shower, she announced, heading toward our bathroom with her toiletry bag clutched tightly in her hands. While the water was running, I did a quick inventory of her suitcase. Along with the men's clothing, I found a receipt from a restaurant in Camden, Maine, about 2 hours north of our house. The date was from 2 days ago, when she was supposed to be in France. The receipt was for 2 people. Lobster dinners, a bottle of expensive wine, and chocolate cake for dessert. Lena hated chocolate cake. When she came out of the shower, I was sitting on our bed holding the receipt. So, I said conversationally, how's the lobster in Paris these days? Her face went white. What do you mean? Well, according to this receipt from the waterfront restaurant in Camden, Maine, you had lobster 2 days ago. Unless they're doing some amazing international delivery now. She sat down heavily on the edge of the bed, wrapped in her towel. For a moment, I thought she might come clean. Tell me everything. Give us a chance to work through this like adults. Instead, she went on the offensive. You went through my things? Her voice was sharp with indignation. What the hell, Gabe? Don't you trust me? Should I? I can't believe this. I come home from a trip with my friends, and you're acting like some kind of paranoid detective. Your friends, right? How are Britt and Jessica, by the way? Should I give them a call, see how they enjoyed France? She stood up abruptly. I don't have to justify my friendships to you. No, but you might want to justify your boyfriend. The word hung in the air between us like a live grenade. Lena's mouth opened and closed without sound. Then she did something I'd never seen her do in 12 years of marriage. She started to cry, not the pretty, delicate tears she used when she wanted something. Ugly, desperate sobs that shook her whole body. Gabe, I can explain. I'm sure you can. You always were good with words. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our backyard where we'd hosted barbecues and birthday parties and all the normal things married couples do. But here's the thing, Lena. I don't want to hear your explanation. Not yet. What do you mean? I turned back to face her. I mean, I want you to think very carefully about what you're going to say next. Because once you start talking, once you start explaining and justifying and making excuses, this becomes real. And once it's real, there's no going back. She wiped her nose with the back of her hand. What are you saying? I'm saying you have a choice to make, and I suggest you make it carefully. I left her sitting on our bed and went to sleep in the guest room. Through the thin walls, I could hear her making phone calls late into the night. Urgent, whispered conversations that confirmed everything I already knew. The next morning I woke up to find her gone and a note on the kitchen counter. Went to stay with Britt for a few days. Need to think. That was fine with me. I had some thinking to do myself. My buddy Pete owns an auto repair shop on the outskirts of town, the kind of place where guys go to drink beer, work on cars, and complain about their wives. Pete's been my friend since high school, and he's got 2 qualities that make him invaluable in a situation like mine. He's completely loyal, and he doesn't ask too many questions. So let me get this straight, Pete said, sliding out from underneath a Chevy pickup. Your wife's been screwing around, and instead of throwing her stuff on the lawn and changing the locks, you want to do surveillance? Something like that. Pete wiped his hands on a greasy rag and looked at me with the expression he usually reserved for customers who wanted him to fix their cars with duct tape and prayers. "Gabe, buddy, I love you like a brother, but this sounds like a recipe for disaster." "Maybe. But I need to know what I'm dealing with before I make any big moves." "What kind of big moves?" "The kind that require good information." Pete sighed and grabbed 2 beers from the mini fridge in his office. "All right. What do you need?" That's why Pete's my best friend. He might think I'm making a mistake, but he'll help me make it anyway. We started with the basics. I'd already found Victor Ashland's name in Lena's phone, and a quick internet search told us everything we needed to know. 45 years old, divorced, owned a real estate development company that specialized in luxury lake properties. His company website featured glamour shots of him standing next to expensive boats and smiling like a man who'd never heard the word no. "This guy looks like a complete tool," Pete observed, squinting at Victor's professional headshots on his laptop screen. "Yeah, well, apparently he's Lena's type now." Pete had a friend who worked for the county assessor's office, and within a few hours, we had the address of Victor's lake house. It was about 40 minutes north of town, on a private road that wound through the kind of woods where rich people go to pretend they're outdoorsy. "You want to drive up there and take a look?" Pete asked. "Tonight." We took Pete's truck, which was old enough and beat up enough to blend in anywhere. The lake house turned out to be a sprawling modern thing with floor-to-ceiling windows and a deck that jutted out over the water like the prow of a ship. There were 2 cars in the driveway, a silver BMW that probably cost more than I made in a year, and Lena's Honda. "Well, there's your confirmation," Pete said quietly. We parked on a hill overlooking the property and settled in to watch. I'd brought binoculars and a thermos of coffee. Pete had brought a bag of beef jerky and a flask of something that smelled like it could strip paint. Around 9 o'clock, they came out onto the deck. I'd seen pictures of Victor online, but seeing him in person was different. He was tall and lean, with the kind of tan that comes from spending time on boats rather than construction sites. He was wearing khakis and a polo shirt that probably cost more than my work boots. Everything about him screamed money and privilege, and the kind of casual arrogance that comes from never having to worry about paying bills. Lena was wearing a dress I'd never seen before. Red, like the one Victor had mentioned in his text messages. She looked beautiful and happy and completely comfortable, like she belonged in this world of lake houses and expensive wine. They were laughing about something. Victor had his arm around her waist, and she was leaning into him in a way that made my chest tight. This wasn't just sex. This was intimacy, connection, all the things that had been missing from our marriage for longer than I cared to admit. "You okay, man?" Pete asked quietly. "Yeah, I'm fine." But I wasn't fine. Watching your wife with another man is like getting punched in the stomach in slow motion. You see it coming. You brace for impact, but it still knocks the wind out of you. We watched them for another hour. They grilled steaks on a deck that cost more than most people's cars. They drank wine that probably had a vintage year. They looked like a couple in a magazine ad for the good life. When they went inside, Pete and I drove home in silence. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Britt's apartment complex. Lena's car wasn't there, which meant she was probably already back at the lake house, but Britt's car was, and that gave me an idea. I waited in the parking lot until Britt came out to go to work. She was 28, blonde, and worked as a social media manager for a local marketing firm. She spent most of her time posting pictures of her food and complaining about her dating life. She was also the kind of person who couldn't keep a secret if her life depended on it. "Gabe?" She looked surprised to see me. "What are you doing here?" "Hey, Britt. I was hoping to talk to you about Lena." "Oh." Her face got that careful, neutral expression people wear when they're about to lie to you. "What about her?" "Well, she said she stayed here the other night, but her car wasn't in the parking lot when I drove by around midnight. I was worried something might have happened to her." Britt's eyes darted around the parking lot, like she was looking for an escape route. She went out. With friends. What friends? Just, people from work. At midnight on a Tuesday? Lena likes to socialize. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much she could get away with not telling me. The thing about people like Britt is that they're fundamentally selfish. They'll help you lie and cheat as long as it doesn't cost them anything. But the moment they think they might get in trouble, they'll throw you under the bus without hesitation. Look, Britt, I know about Victor. Her face went pale. You do? I know about the lake house. I know about the trip that wasn't to Europe. I know about all of it. She leaned against her car like her legs wouldn't support her anymore. Oh God. Gabe, I'm so sorry. I told her this was a bad idea. I told her she should just talk to you, work things out. But she said, what did she say? She said you wouldn't understand, that you'd never been able to give her the kind of life she wanted. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not because they were cruel, but because they were probably true. I was a construction foreman who drove a 10-year-old truck and shopped at Walmart. Victor was a real estate developer who owned a lake house and drove a BMW. In purely material terms, there was no comparison. How long has this been going on? I asked. About 6 months, maybe longer. She met him at some networking event for her job. And you helped her lie about it. Britt looked like she was about to cry. She's my friend, Gabe. What was I supposed to do? You were supposed to tell her she was making a mistake. You were supposed to remind her that she had a husband who loved her. But you guys seemed so unhappy. She said you barely talked anymore, that you lived like roommates. Another truth that hurt worse than any lie. Lena and I had been drifting apart for years, but I'd thought that was normal. I'd thought that was what happened to marriages after the honeymoon period ended. I'd been content with comfortable routine. Apparently, she'd been dying of boredom. What's the plan, Britt? Are they going to keep sneaking around forever, or is there an endgame here? She looked around the parking lot again, then leaned closer to me. She's going to ask for a divorce. Victor's been pressuring her to make it official. When? Soon. She's just trying to figure out the best way to do it. The best way to do it. Like there was a good way to end a 12-year marriage. Like there was a strategy that would make betrayal hurt less. I thanked Britt for her honesty and drove home. I had a lot of thinking to do, and not much time to do it. Lena came home that evening with takeout from our favorite Thai restaurant and a bottle of wine. She'd put on makeup and done her hair, and she was smiling the kind of smile she used to give me when we were dating. I thought we could have dinner together, she said, setting the food on our kitchen table. Talk about things. What things? Us. Our marriage. Where we go from here. I sat down across from her and watched her serve pad thai onto our plates like this was a normal dinner between a normal married couple. Okay, let's talk. She poured wine into 2 glasses and took a sip from hers before speaking. Gabe, I know things have been difficult between us lately. Have they? You know they have. We've been living like strangers. We barely talk. We don't do anything together anymore. We're more like roommates than husband and wife. I took a bite of pad thai. It tasted like cardboard. And whose fault is that? It's nobody's fault. Sometimes people just grow apart. Grow apart? Is that what we're calling it? She set down her fork and looked at me directly for the first time since she'd come home. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But I need you to understand that this isn't something that just happened overnight. What isn't something that just happened overnight? My feelings. The way I've been feeling about us. You mean the way you've been feeling about Victor? She flinched like I'd slapped her. How do you know about Victor? Does it matter? Yes, it matters. Did you hire a private investigator? Are you having me followed? I almost laughed. Lena, You left his phone number in your backup phone, which you left in our bedroom drawer. You're not exactly a criminal mastermind here." She was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her untouched food. "I didn't mean for this to happen. But it did happen. Yes. And you're in love with him." Another long pause. "Yes." I felt something break inside my chest, like a bone snapping. Even though I'd known it was coming, even though I'd seen them together at the lake house, hearing her say it out loud was different. "How long? Does it matter?" "It matters to me." She took another sip of wine. 6 months. Maybe a little longer. "And you've been planning to leave me." "I've been thinking about it." Thinking about it or planning it? Because according to Britt, Victor's been pressuring you to make it official. Lena's face hardened. "You talked to Britt?" "I talked to Britt. I also drove up to the lake house and watched you two playing house on the deck." "You followed me?" "I followed my wife, who was supposed to be in Paris with her girlfriends but was actually shacked up with her boyfriend in a lake house 40 minutes from our home." She stood up abruptly, knocking over her wine glass. The red liquid spread across our white tablecloth like blood. "I can't do this anymore, Gabe. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not." "Then don't pretend. Tell me the truth." "The truth is that I'm not happy. I haven't been happy for a long time." "And Victor makes you happy." "Yes, he does." "What does he give you that I don't?" She looked at me like the answer should be obvious. "Everything, Gabe. He gives me everything." "Such as?" "Excitement, adventure, a future that's bigger than this." She gestured around our kitchen with disgust. "He takes me places. He introduces me to interesting people. He makes me feel alive again. And I make you feel dead. You make me feel ordinary. And I don't want to be ordinary anymore." There it was. The truth that had been lurking underneath all the lies and excuses and rationalizations. I wasn't enough for her. I'd never been enough for her. I was just a placeholder until something better came along. "So what happens now?" I asked. "I want a divorce." I figured. "I want to do this amicably, Gabe. I don't want to hurt you any more than I already have." "How generous of you." "I'm serious. We can split everything fairly. The house, the savings, all of it. I just want to move on with my life." I looked around our kitchen, at the life we'd built together over 12 years. The coffee maker we'd bought for our first apartment. The dishes we'd gotten as wedding presents. The refrigerator covered with photos from vacations and birthdays and all the ordinary moments that had seemed important at the time. Move on to what? Victor's lake house? Maybe. I don't know yet. But you know you don't want this anymore. I know I don't want this anymore. I stood up and started clearing the table. The pad thai was cold and congealed, inedible, like everything else in our marriage, apparently. "Okay," I said. "Okay?" "Okay, you can have your divorce, but I have some conditions." She looked suspicious. "What kind of conditions?" "I want 2 weeks." "2 weeks for what?" "To get my affairs in order. Find a lawyer, figure out my finances, that sort of thing." "That's reasonable." "And I want you to stay here during those 2 weeks. In the guest room, if you prefer, but in this house." "Why?" "Because I think we owe it to 12 years of marriage to end this properly, face to face, like adults." She considered this. "What about Victor?" "What about him?" "He's not going to be happy about me staying here. I'm sure he'll survive 2 weeks without you." She nodded slowly. "Okay, 2 weeks." We shook hands across our kitchen table, like business partners concluding a deal, which, I suppose, is what we were now. The next morning, I called my boss and told him I needed to take some personal time. Then I drove to Pete's shop and told him I needed a favor. "What kind of favor?" Pete asked, looking up from the engine he was rebuilding. "The kind that requires discretion and a complete lack of curiosity about my motivations." Pete wiped his hands on a rag and gave me a long look. This is about Lena, isn't it? Maybe. Gabe, I know you're hurting, but whatever you're thinking about doing, maybe you should think about it some more. I've done nothing but think for the past week. And what have you decided? I've decided that some people need to learn that actions have consequences. Pete sighed and grabbed 2 beers from his mini fridge. All right, what do you need? I pulled out my phone and showed him a photo of Victor's BMW that I'd taken at the lake house. I need to borrow this car for a few hours. You want to steal his car? I want to borrow his car. There's a difference. What kind of difference? The kind where it gets returned in the same condition I found it. Pete studied the photo. That's a nice car, Gabe. Expensive. The kind of car that has GPS tracking and alarm systems and all sorts of electronic security. Can you get around that stuff? Probably. But why do you want his car? Because I want Victor to think someone else stole it. Someone else like who? Like his ex-wife. Pete nearly choked on his beer. His ex-wife? Her name is Patricia Ashland. She lives in Boston now, but she still owns half of Victor's business. According to the divorce records I found online, it wasn't exactly an amicable split. You looked up his divorce records? I looked up everything. Tax liens, business partnerships, property records, court filings. You'd be amazed what you can find if you know where to look. Pete set down his beer and stared at me. Gabe, what the hell are you planning? I'm planning to give Victor and Lena exactly what they deserve. Which is what? Each other. Over the next few days, I put my plan into motion. It was more complicated than anything I'd ever attempted, but construction work had taught me to think systematically and pay attention to details. First, I needed to understand Victor's routine. That meant more surveillance, more sitting in parking lots with binoculars and coffee. I learned that he went to the gym every morning at 6, that he had lunch at the same restaurant every Tuesday, that he drove to the lake house every Thursday evening and stayed until Sunday morning. Second, I needed to understand his relationship with Lena. That meant listening to their phone conversations, which wasn't as hard as you might think. Lena had gotten careless about privacy, probably because she thought I was too stupid or too defeated to pay attention. What I learned was that Victor was getting impatient. He wanted Lena to file for divorce immediately. He'd already talked to his lawyer about the best way to protect his assets during her divorce proceedings. He was treating my marriage like a business acquisition, complete with due diligence and risk assessment. Third, I needed leverage, and for that, I needed help from an unexpected source. Patricia Ashland turned out to be a 43-year-old attorney who specialized in corporate law. She was smart, successful, and according to the court records, very angry about the way her marriage had ended. Victor had apparently cheated on her with multiple women during their marriage, and she'd only found out about it during the divorce proceedings. I called her office on a Thursday afternoon. Ms. Ashland, my name is Gabe Franklin. I think we have a mutual acquaintance. Oh? Who's that? Victor Ashland, your ex-husband. There was a long pause. What do you want, Mr. Franklin? I want to have a conversation about Victor's pattern of behavior with married women. Another pause. Are you recording this call? No. Are you a journalist? No. I'm a construction foreman whose wife is having an affair with your ex-husband. I see. And what makes you think I'd be interested in discussing Victor with you? Because according to the court records, he cost you about $2 million in the divorce, and because he's about to do the same thing to another married woman that he did to you. Mr. Franklin, I'm going to give you some free legal advice. Whatever you're thinking about doing, don't do it. Revenge fantasies might feel good, but they have a way of backfiring. I'm not looking for revenge, Ms. Ashland. I'm looking for justice. What's the difference? Revenge is personal. Justice is systematic. She was quiet for a moment. What exactly are you proposing? A meeting. 1 hour of your time. If you're not interested in what I have to say, I'll never contact you again. And if I am interested? Then we discuss how to make sure Victor faces some consequences for his behavior. What kind of consequences? The legal kind. We agreed to meet at a coffee shop in Portland the next day. Patricia turned out to be an attractive woman with short dark hair and the kind of sharp, intelligent eyes that probably made opposing lawyers nervous. She was wearing a tailored suit that probably cost more than I made in a week, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who was used to being the smartest person in the room. "So," she said, settling into the chair across from me, "tell me about Victor's latest conquest." I told her about Lena, about the affair, the lies, the fake trip to Europe, about Victor's plan to pressure her into a quick divorce so they could be together officially. "Sounds familiar," Patricia said dryly. "That's exactly how he operated with me. Lots of romantic gestures, expensive trips, promises about the wonderful life we'd have together. Right up until the moment I found out he was doing the same thing with 2 other women." 2 other women? "At the same time. Victor has a type, Mr. Franklin. He likes married women who are bored with their lives and looking for excitement. He makes them feel special, shows them a world of luxury and sophistication, and then convinces them to leave their husbands for him. And then what? Then he gets bored and moves on to the next one, but not before making sure he's protected financially." She pulled out her phone and showed me a series of text messages. "These are from last month. Victor's been trying to get me to sell him my share of the business for pennies on the dollar. He claims the company is struggling financially, but I know better." I looked at the messages. Victor was alternating between threats and pleading, trying every angle to convince Patricia to give up her stake in his company. "Why does he want you out?" "Because he's planning something big, a major development project probably, the kind that requires significant capital investment, and he can't do it while I own half the company." "What kind of development project?" "I'm not sure, but I have my suspicions." She pulled out a folder from her briefcase. "I've been doing some research on Victor's recent activities, property purchases, permit applications, loan applications. He's been very busy." She spread several documents across the table. Property deeds, building permits, environmental impact studies, all for a massive lakefront development project about an hour north of town. "He's planning to build a resort," Patricia explained. "Luxury condos, a marina, golf course, the works. It's a $100 million project. And he needs your half of the company to finance it." "Exactly. But there's a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The kind that could land him in federal prison." She pulled out another document, an environmental impact study that showed significant wetland areas on the proposed development site. "Victor's been bribing local officials to overlook the environmental issues. I have documentation of cash payments, falsified reports, the whole thing." I stared at the documents. "Why haven't you turned this in to the authorities?" "Because I've been waiting for the right moment. I wanted to make sure I had enough evidence to guarantee a conviction." "And do you?" "Almost. I need one more piece of the puzzle." "Which is?" "I need access to Victor's personal files, his home computer specifically. That's where he keeps the records of his bribes and payoffs." I leaned back in my chair and smiled. "Ms. Ashland, I think we can help each other." The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Patricia would provide the technical expertise and legal knowledge. I would provide access and local intelligence. Together, we would give Victor Ashland exactly what he deserved. Step 1 was getting into Victor's lake house. That turned out to be easier than I'd expected, thanks to Lena's carelessness with information. During one of her phone conversations with Victor, she'd mentioned that he kept a spare key hidden under a fake rock near the back deck. She'd laughed about how suburban it was for someone who thought of himself as sophisticated. I waited until Thursday evening, when I knew Victor and Lena would be at dinner at their favorite restaurant in Camden. Then I drove to the lake house, found the fake rock, and let myself in. The house was exactly what you'd expect from a man trying to impress women with his wealth. Leather furniture, expensive art, a sound system that probably cost more than my truck. Everything was designed to say, I have money and taste, but it felt cold and impersonal, like a hotel lobby. Victor's home office was on the second floor, overlooking the lake. His computer was password protected, but Patricia had given me a USB drive that would bypass the security. I plugged it in and waited while it did its work. While the drive was copying Victor's files, I looked around the office. The walls were covered with photos of Victor with various women, all young and attractive. Lena was in several of the more recent photos, but I noticed that Victor had been careful not to include any pictures that would clearly identify her as married. There was also a framed photo of Victor with a man I didn't recognize, both of them holding champagne glasses and smiling at the camera. The man looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. The USB drive finished its work, and I pocketed it. Then I did something that wasn't part of the original plan. I took photos of everything in the office, the pictures on the walls, the papers on the desk, the books on the shelves. I had a feeling they might be useful later. I was back in my truck and driving home before Victor and Lena finished their appetizers. The next morning, I met Patricia at her hotel in Portland. She'd driven up from Boston specifically to review the files from Victor's computer. "This is perfect," she said, scrolling through documents on her laptop. "Bank records, correspondence with local officials, construction contracts, everything we need to prove the bribery and corruption. What happens now?" "Now I turn this over to the FBI. They'll open an investigation, and within a few weeks, Victor will be facing federal charges." "How long will he go to prison?" "If convicted, 10 to 15 years minimum, plus financial penalties that will bankrupt him." I felt a surge of satisfaction. Victor had spent months manipulating my wife, convincing her to betray her marriage, treating me like an obstacle to be removed. Now he was about to learn what it felt like to have his life destroyed by someone else's actions. But I wasn't done yet. Step 2 involved Lena's friends, not Britt, who was too flighty and unreliable, but her work colleagues, specifically her boss at the advertising agency where she worked. I'd done some research on Lena's company and discovered that they had very strict policies about employee conduct. Extramarital affairs weren't explicitly prohibited, but conduct that reflects poorly on the company's reputation was grounds for termination. I made copies of some of the more explicit text messages between Lena and Victor, along with photos from their various romantic getaways. Then I mailed them anonymously to Lena's boss, along with a note explaining that one of their employees was having a very public affair with a local businessman who was about to be indicted on federal corruption charges. I didn't have to wait long for results. Lena came home that Friday afternoon in tears. She'd been fired, effective immediately. Her boss had cited moral turpitude and conduct incompatible with company values. She'd also been informed that the company would be fighting her application for unemployment benefits. "They can't do this," she said, pacing around our living room like a caged animal. "It's discrimination. It's invasion of privacy." "Did you sign a morality clause when you were hired?" I asked. "What?" "A morality clause, a contract provision that allows them to fire you for behavior that damages the company's reputation." She stopped pacing and stared at me. "How do you know about morality clauses?" "I know about a lot of things, Lena. You did this. You got me fired. I didn't get you fired. Your behavior got you fired." "My behavior? What about Victor's behavior?" "What about it? He's the one who pursued me. He's the one who convinced me to have an affair." I almost laughed. Even now, facing the consequences of her choices, Lena was looking for someone else to blame. "Nobody forced you to cheat on your husband, Lena. You don't understand. Victor said he loved me. He said we had a future together. And you believed him." "Yes, I believed him. Why wouldn't I?" "Because he's done this before. Multiple times. You're not special, Lena. You're just the latest in a long line of married women he's seduced and abandoned." She sat down heavily on our couch, looking defeated. "What are you talking about?" I told her about Patricia, about Victor's pattern of targeting married women, about the other affairs, the lies, the manipulation. You're lying, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Call him. Ask him about Patricia. Ask him about the others. She pulled out her phone and dialed Victor's number. I could hear his voice through the speaker, but I couldn't make out the words. Lena's face went pale as she listened. Victor, I need to ask you something, she said. Have you done this before? With other married women? More talking from Victor's end. That's not what I asked. I asked if you've had affairs with other married women. A longer pause. How many others? Lena's face crumpled as she listened to Victor's answer. She hung up without saying goodbye. How many? I asked. He said it didn't matter, that I was different. But how many? He wouldn't say, but he didn't deny it. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Outside, I could hear kids playing in the neighborhood, the normal sounds of suburban life continuing despite the fact that our marriage was disintegrating. What happens now? Lena asked finally. Now you decide what kind of person you want to be. What do you mean? I mean you have a choice. You can keep believing Victor's lies and hoping he'll rescue you from the mess you've made. Or you can start taking responsibility for your actions and figure out how to rebuild your life. I don't know how to rebuild my life. Neither do I. But I'm going to try. She looked at me with something that might have been regret. I'm sorry, Gabe. For all of it. I know you are. Can you forgive me? I thought about that question for a long time. Could I forgive her? Maybe, eventually. But forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. It didn't mean pretending that betrayal didn't have consequences. I don't know, I said finally. But it doesn't matter anymore. Why not? Because forgiveness is something you do for yourself, not for the person who hurt you. And I'm not ready to do that yet. She nodded and went upstairs to pack her things. An hour later, she was gone. 3 weeks later, Victor Ashland was arrested by federal agents on charges of bribery, corruption, and conspiracy to defraud the government. The story made the front page of the local newspaper and was picked up by television stations throughout New England. I watched the news coverage from Pete's auto shop, drinking beer and feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. Victor's mugshot showed a man who looked nothing like the confident, arrogant businessman from his company website. He looked scared and small and suddenly very aware that actions have consequences. Think he'll go to prison? Pete asked. Patricia thinks so. The evidence is pretty overwhelming. What about Lena? What about her? You heard from her lately? I shook my head. Lena had moved in with Britt after leaving our house, but according to the neighborhood gossip network, she'd been having trouble finding work. Word of her affair and firing had spread through the local business community, and nobody wanted to hire someone with a reputation for poor judgment. You feel bad for her? Pete asked. Sometimes. But then I remember that she made her choices. Still, 12 years of marriage. That's gotta count for something. It does count for something. It counts as 12 years of my life that I'll never get back. Pete opened another beer and handed it to me. So what's next for you? I'm thinking about selling the house, starting over somewhere new. Where would you go? I don't know yet. Somewhere warm, maybe. Somewhere nobody knows my story. You could stay here, you know. This is your home. This was our home. Now it's just a house full of bad memories. We drank in comfortable silence, watching the news coverage of Victor's arrest. The reporter was standing outside the federal courthouse, explaining the charges and the potential penalties. 10 to 15 years in federal prison, millions of dollars in fines, the complete destruction of his business empire. You know what the funny thing is? I said. What? If Lena had just asked for a divorce, if she'd been honest about being unhappy, I probably would have agreed to it. We could have split everything fairly, stayed friends, moved on with our lives. Instead, she chose to lie and cheat. And now she's lost everything. Her job, her reputation, her boyfriend, her marriage. all because she couldn't be honest about what she wanted. You think she's learned anything from this? I doubt it. People like Lena don't learn. They just move on to the next situation and make the same mistakes over again. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia Ashland. Victor pled guilty. 15 years in prison plus restitution. I showed Pete. 15 years, he said. Long time. Not long enough, I replied. You hate him? I don't hate him. He got what he deserved. So did Lena. 2 months later, I sold my house and moved to North Carolina, working for a beach house construction company and renting a small apartment. Lena, I heard, was waitressing, living in a studio, and driving a beat-up Honda. Her friend Britt ditched her after the scandal, proving fair-weather friends vanish fast. I didn't feel sorry for her. Choices have consequences. One evening, Lena called, "Gabe, I'm sorry, for everything. Can we try again?" "No," I said. "You don't love me. You love not being alone. Please, I have no one. That's not my problem." I hung up, watched the sun set, and changed my number the next day. 6 months later, Patricia wrote, Victor's empire was liquidated, and she started a foundation for women victimized by men like him. I kept her letter as a reminder that justice can prevail. Lena moved to Florida, still chasing men who promise what they can't deliver. Some people never learn. I did, though. You can't control others, but you can choose not to let their choices define you. I chose that, and I'm finally happy.